Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side.
All right, here we are. Welcome, Rabbi Nir.
Shalom, Rabbi Eli.
There may be something there. Don't joke too much. Say enough times, I'll get a black yarmulke and this game will really start. I was introduced to you by Yaakov Shapiro, who let me know that you're coming out with this book, Becoming One, a Kabbalistic Guide to Finding and Nurturing True Love, that you co-authored with Rabbi Ginsburgh.
Yep.
And I guess since the time we were introduced, the book was published.
Yep.
So thank you for a copy.
Happy to share it.
Thank you. So maybe before we go into the book a little bit, I've heard Rabbi Ginsburgh's name a ton of times. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about him, your work with him, who he is, and how you came to co-author a book with him, and then we'll go into the book a little bit.
Sure. So Rabbi Ginsburgh is probably the most prolific and innovative teacher of Kabbalah and Chassidut, what we call the inner dimension of the Torah in our generation. First and foremost, in terms of volume of work, that's constantly original, but also in terms of the quality of it, the actual innovations that he's bringing to the table. It's all coming out of the long tradition of Kabbalah and Chassidut. Kabbalah and Chassidut being the two main levels of what we call the inner dimension of the Torah. Kabbalah is far more ancient, it's more technical, it has to do with very profound models about how the world works, how the Torah works, how the soul works. And Chassidut is translating all of that into the inner work of the individual, the inner psychological work. It's not so much about the higher worlds, it's about bringing knowledge and light from the higher worlds into our own lives. So it's something that's accessible to everyone. But within this...
Can you explain that distinction a little bit better?
So it's a bit like... I don't know if...
One is more practical, you're saying?
Yeah. It's a bit like... It's like mysticism and psychology. That would be like the best sort of headlines. That Kabbalah is mystical in nature. It talks about hidden realities, inner levels within the Torah, within reality, higher worlds, the Kabbalistic Sefirot, that's the system of emanations, and it's all very much out there. And that's why it was only a very few people would learn this. It was not for everyone. You could go maybe crazy learning about all these hidden realities, and so you need to be maybe a certain age, and you needed to learn a lot of revealed Torah, and it was very technical also, sometimes almost like very dense architecture of levels within levels and stories. And so there's a whole history to Kabbalah. And then Kabbalah is very ancient, so it starts with an old, very ancient book called Sefer Yetzirah, which is very mysterious and sort of cryptic. And then you get the Zohar, which is just a very long mystical exegesis on the Torah itself, on the portions. And then the watershed is the Arizal, the holy the Rabbi Yitzchak Luria of 16th century Tzfat Kabbalist. And that's like the big watershed, because he's the one who sort of put everything together and brought it all together. And he's accepted by all branches of Judaism who deal with Kabbalah. And then Chassidut is 18th century, Eastern Europe. The Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, he appeared to be a very simple Jew. He really was a very secret sort of Kabbalist who would learn Kabbalah. On the outside, he seemed like a very simple Jew. But then at some point, when he was 36, after 10 years of intense learning of Kabbalah, it was sort of revealed to him that he needs to go out and walk among the people and start sharing the light. And what he did was that he basically understood that Judaism, the Jewish people and Judaism and the whole endeavor of the Torah, which is to bring the divine light into the world and make this world a dwelling place, it's called, for God, all this is in a state of exile, not just because the Jewish people are in exile, but they're spiritually in exile. And they're disconnected from their own hearts and souls. And he realized you can't get to the deeper levels within ourselves without learning the deeper levels of the Torah.
Was he identifying a new reality that had just emerged amongst the Jewish people, or something that had been
going on for a while?
In
a way, because what happened was that a little bit before that, there was a false Messiah. His name was Shabtai Tzvi. And he tried to bring the Kabbalah out, but in a terrible way, in a way that he threw away the commandments and the Jewish law, and it created anarchy, and it was like a big trauma. And maybe he saw that as a signal that the time has come to bring the inner dimension of the Torah out, but in a proper way. It's a general rule that if something is going on in the world, even if it's a very, very negative, it's like a signal that why is it happening in this negative way? It's because the good people aren't doing it in a good way. Whenever you have something, a bad trend in the world, or something that's causing chaos, then maybe the obvious reaction would be to push it away, to go in the opposite direction, to do the opposite in order to counteract it.
Right.
But the Hassidic concept is of tikkun. Tikkun is rectifying the negative phenomenon with a similar positive phenomenon that's trying to do the same thing, but doing it in a more rectified way, in a better way.
Can you give another example besides for Shabtai Tzvi and Chassidus?
So, well, there is one. Maybe we'll talk about it later. It's like a big one that I have. Like, I think everything that's going on today with the gender identity phenomenon that's went a little bit off the rails, or more than a little bit off the rails. It's something that, the reaction, the conservative reaction is there are only two genders, stop the woke craziness and all this. And it makes sense because what they're doing is they're negating the biological reality, the binary reality. But that's not a tikkun, it's not a rectified approach. The rectified approach is to say, well, there is something to it. The whole gender inner landscape is more complex than the biological binary. And so that's a big topic. We're sort of straying. Maybe we'll come back to it. But just to finish what we said.
But it's perfect. You said it like that, and we can get back to it later.
So the Baal Shem Tov recognized that there's this state of it's called in Hebrew ilafon. It's like the Jewish people fainted in the world, maybe fainted, and it seems to be awake, seems to be alive, but it's really a bit like a dead man walking. There's something is hollow,
like asleep within a sleep.
Yeah. And so, and he said it's high time to really, it was really the redemption movement. It was the biggest spiritual awakening revolution in Jewish history, in recent history. He said we need, in order for people to connect to their souls and their hearts, to the inner dimension of who they are, they need to start learning the inner dimension of the Torah. The outer dimension of the Torah tells you how to live, how to behave, on the outside. Even the psychology, there was a psychology, it was the Musar books of morality. So that went in the inside, but it went in the inside in a very external way. It sort of lectured to you. The person who would give out the morality talks, he would lecture to you, that he would tell you that this is a wrong feeling to have, and this is a right feeling to have, and you should uproot this feeling, and you should plant this feeling, and you should break that, you should develop that, and then people would go home, and then their head would lecture their hearts. But the heart would just, cow down under this kind of preaching. And in Hebrew it's called lehatif musar. Lehatif is like to sprinkle truths from above. But it doesn't reach, it's preaching, it preaches to the heart, it doesn't reach the heart.
Got it.
And so the Baal Shem Tov wanted to reach the heart, not just preach. And so all of Chassidut really is finding indirect, surprising channels that distract you even from rational, straightforward thinking in order to get to your heart. So it could be stories, it could be music, it could be very surprising takes on familiar verses or concepts that you already know from the Torah, and suddenly you reread them in a totally revolutionary way. And it could be just this connection to what was later called the Rebbe, that there is a Rebbe. The Rebbe is someone, it's not just a Rav, a rabbi, a regular rabbi that tells you this is forbidden, this is asur, this is mutar, this you can do, this you shouldn't do. He is like a conduit that he gives you, he demonstrates to you what is it like to cleave to Hashem constantly. It's someone who is constantly connected to above. And just by looking at that and being connected to this person, it gives you a living example of what it means to really connect to God, not just to the Torah, but also to God in a direct way.
So in some cases, and this may be a little sacrilegious to say, it feels like more than just an example that people are learning from. There's a...
Yeah, it's on the one level it's an example, but it's not just that. It's by connecting to the Rebbe, it inspires me. Now, this is where the opposition began. The opposition began, well, there were several reasons. One of the reasons is that they were afraid that this kind of connection to a Rebbe, it could deteriorate into a form of idolatry or a form of like human idolatry. You idolize the person. Yes. And this is a very good warning. It's a real good warning sign. And so the Hasidic challenge, in a way, is how to operate this whole system of Rebbe and Hasidim, without disciples, with him being it's called a unifying mean and not a disconnecting mean. He needs to be a mean or something in between you and God, in a way that connects you to God. If it becomes the Rebbe instead of God, that's clearly not the intention.
So how does someone...
In that sense, when I look at the world, so I'm a Chassid.
Right.
And I look at the world and I say, so why are there so many non-Chassids? And the answer that I have is this. It's a constant warning for the Chassidim not to fall into that trap, and to remember that Chassidut is all about the Rebbe the Rebbe needs to be like transparent. And that's what he is, in a way. He's something that is so connected and selfless in a way that through him, you can suddenly get a glimpse of godliness, of connecting to God.
So why through him? And can you explain a little bit more about the risk? Meaning, how does someone make sure they're not falling over into the risk?
It's really not more complicated than what it sounds. My constant thoughts have to be with God, not with the Rebbe. I want to connect with God, but if I have this opportunity and I seeing someone who is connected in a deeper way, then it's inspiring. It's connecting me. And,
as an example, I understand.
So, an example, people Hasidim, they go to the grave of the Rebbe if the Rebbe has passed away, and so there's always the question: so who do I pray to? Who do I dive into? And the answer is very simple: you dive into God, you dive into Hashem, but you sort of ask this Rebbe to speak in your behalf, and to maybe use his merits to help you. And this Rebbe helps you connect to your higher self. It just reminds you that you can be much more than you become, because it's a human example of divine living, of godly living. So anyway, just to round off to close the windows, back to your question. So that's Kabbalah and Chassidut. So I said Rabbi Ginsburgh. You asked about Rabbi Ginsburgh and so he is drawing from this tradition. It's all of his innovations are it's founded on things that are around. You can find them in the books, but then he gives them sort of a twist that's relevant to our generation. That was my feeling, and everyone who got to know his work. The problem is that sometimes it's very, very difficult to understand. Most of his books, for most people, and his classes, it took me 3 years to understand.
What made you keep going?
So I was about tshuva. I came out of nowhere. I grew up ultra secular.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Tel Aviv.
Uh-huh.
I'm Israeli. Grew up in Tel Aviv. And my father defined our home chiloni lemehadrin. It's like ultra orthodox secular. and so that's where I grew up. And no holidays, no bar mitzvah. My father grew up in a kibbutz, so they erased the Jewish hard disk.
So you're the
black sheep. My mother actually grew up frum, ultra orthodox frum, but she left everything, joined my father in his very bohemian Tel Aviv world. And my father was like a celebrity in Israel. He was like on TV, and he was in papers, and was like this, even like a symbol of bohemian, left-wing, liberal, secular Israeliness.
Oh, interesting.
So that was that's a lot of weight to carry. Like you're symbolizing this thing. So I went even more at first, and
even more than him in that direction.
Yeah, more.
Got it.
Yeah, but so he was very much an Israeli. He wasn't connected to Judaism, but very much an Israeli. And I said, I don't want to be an Israeli. It's also limiting. I want to be a man of the world. I want to be cosmopolitan. I want to be universal. Right. I don't want any connection to not just the people, not just the religion, not just the people, the land, anything. I want out. That's why my English is, because I stopped reading Hebrew when I was about 12, and I only read English, and I was just in this fixation of running away from anything that had to do with my Jewish identity. And so the reversal began when I was about 21 or 22. I fulfilled my dream. I went to England. I started learning art. I was in a dormitory. There were people from all over the world. And this was like the Messianic days, It's like there's no borders, no nations.
Right.
And I was surrounded by people from all over the world. And so I was euphoric for a few weeks. And then I started asking them about their own cultures, because I said, we're meeting here, and everyone is coming out of cultures with histories, with mythology, with culture, with folk tales. And they couldn't tell me anything, because nobody knew anything. They were all... And then I started getting angry at them, and I told myself, you're a bunch of just very spoiled liberal kids who are totally disconnected from your heritage, nothing about where you're coming from, and until the same question was addressed to me, and it was actually quite amazing that I couldn't figure it out myself, that I was angry at myself also.
Right.
And then I went back to my country and I started learning. It was a gradual journey. And then
So it started more with Judaism and then eventually to Orthodoxy.
Yeah. It started actually with politics. I wanted to go into more active on the left side of the map. I wanted to be more actively involved in Israel from the left side. And then gradually I lived in Jerusalem because I didn't want to go back to Tel Aviv. So I wanted to still experience a little change. So Jerusalem has a lot of more religious people in it. And also, then you meet a lot of secular people, then you realize they're all ex-religious. So everywhere you go, you're surrounded. And so I couldn't escape it anymore. And then I was fortunate enough in the second year of my university to meet someone who was the perfect person to connect me to Judaism, because he was very well educated. He was in the university, he was studying history and philosophy. And that's what I appreciated. I couldn't care less if he knew a lot of Torah.
Right.
But he also was very profoundly religious. And so this was a riddle that I had to crack. How could this be? For me, it was impossible. You can't be both devoutly religious and have a very wide education. It's like impossible. And the religious people I knew, they were very educated, they didn't seem very religious to me. And the very religious people I knew, they didn't have any, secular education. So then I met this guy and I said, okay, this is interesting. And that opened me up to things. And then I started exploring the Jewish landscape in Jerusalem and in books. And it was a gradual process. I went through the New Age, world for like a year, and it was all kinds of things. So then it all led to... I realized that what I was looking for a bunch of things that I thought were disparate. I was looking for a spiritual, let's say, system or a path.
Okay.
Because then you realize at one point you can't go all the paths simultaneously. There's this metaphor of a mountain with a lot of paths, and if you go from path to path, you're not climbing the mountain, you have to find... So I need like a spiritual path. I also wanted something that has very clear morality to it, because I didn't like the fuzzy morality of much of the New Age world.
For example?
I felt that commitment between couples is totally fuzzy in the New Age festivals and the New Age world, so there's a lot of spirituality, but the whole idea of what's right and wrong on a very practical level, you need to be compassionate, but it's not enough.
Well, like open marriages.
So that's the prime example of this,
yes.
But it trickles down to something it's maybe like a general compass. You want to be compassionate, but it's not. It doesn't solve a lot of so many issues and problems. And I was also learning about politics, and I wasn't just becoming, into spirituality. I was exploring everything. I started exploring the right-wing world and the conservative world, because everything was sort of opening up. And it was a big crisis. I had to go through a big crisis of coming out of my shell and then exploring all the others. So one of the others was religion in general, because I was anti all religions, and one of them was the right-wing world, the conservative world. So anyway, I was looking for a spiritual path. I was looking for something that is practical on a very detailed level, and I was looking for a connection to my national identity. It's another thing that suddenly woke up. I can't ignore it. You can't be just an individual and a human being. There is something, whether you want to or not. There is something in between. So, and then I realized it all leads to Judaism. I can find all of this.
Understood.
In Judaism. And also, the whole thing specifically about commitment in relationships, that to take it very seriously and not to leave it sort of very open or unclear, it was very important to me also. I realized that's something precious. Well, at some point it started with, I had a girlfriend, we broke up, and then the same friend that I met in the university, and we spoke, and I told him that something like she didn't really understand what commitment was. And then he threw like a little line. He said, unfortunately, it's our entire generation has this problem today. And it was a little bit off-putting at the beginning because I'm talking to you about my heartbreak. And
Right.
so then we went on to talk about my heartbreak, but that sentence sort of stuck with me. And then it started opening my eyes to the fact that there are so many divorces, so difficult to find marriages, find relationships, and that so many people were lost, and people were in relationships for years, but it wasn't the right one, and then they realized that they lost a lot of years, and a lot of cheating, and all this. And I opened my eyes to me that there's something wrong with this, and that maybe the sexual revolution was not all it was cracked up to be, and so all this, and in
But
the New Age world, that's not.
You're arriving at that from a Jewish, not from a Jewish perspective.
No.
From
Totally
a cultural,
secular.
just seeing it.
Just
Yes.
seeing it.
Yes.
And
seeing how it's not good.
And seeing that it's, always assume that every cultural thing, if it's more advanced, if it's later in time, it's also better. Like that there's this.
Right.
Then I heard it was the children's author, what's his name, who wrote the Narnia books, C.S. Lewis. So he called it chronological snobbery. That the snobbery of the time that I'm living in is the most advanced time ever. Everything is advancing. And it could be that some things are advancing, technology is advancing, we have
Right,
amazing
a lot of
technology,
other
but
things
that
are
doesn't mean that everything morally or culturally is always advancing.
Right.
It could be more complex. It could be advancing in some things and going backwards in other things. And that just opening up to that thought opened me up to the whole rethinking sexual liberalism, basically. And that caused me to look at the religious Jewish world in a new light, and seeing and things that I thought were crazy at the beginning was like that they would date, but they wouldn't be intimate before they got married, and which seemed crazy. Then it gradually seemed a little bit less crazy, and so anyway, all this led to my going into the tshuva world, which is the last thing I would have thought and would have imagined and would have believed in myself that I would end up. And I didn't call it that at the beginning. I was exploring, Judaism, and I was getting to know this world, and then I knew this beautiful, charming families and these people, and I saw that they were very open and they could be very, very educated in like I said, in general, knowledge, but they also connected to this very profound Torah and wisdom, and there was something refined about them that I didn't know before, and then I fell in love with Judaism. Just fell in love with it, and then there were a few years of just wandering around different rabbis and systems and yeshivot and all kinds of things. And then when I got to Rabbi Ginsburgh, I don't think I could have.
What timetable are we talking?
So all this started when I was about 25 or 26, and then when I get to him, it's about 29.
Got it.
That's when I'm getting married at this time, and then we started learning together. Me and my wife, even before we got married, we started as we were preparing. We started learning some of his things, and it was very difficult to wrap your head around. But you could get some glimpses, and the glimpses I felt were amazing. And also there was something structured that I liked, that it wasn't like little thoughts or little ideas or insights. I felt that there was a whole system at work here that he is holding on to, and he knows it, and he's able to guide you through it. It's like as a map, or like an atlas. It's more than a map, it's like an atlas. And that appealed. But on the other hand, it wasn't only structural and technical. There was humor in it, and there was very profound emotional insights, and all this was like. Now he was at first I couldn't connect to him because he appears when he starts classes. There's something a bit frozen about the way he talks, and it's very even monotonous. He whispers all the time, but again something drew me for some reason into this. And he was the Rav of the person whom I met in the university that got me into all of this. His name is Moshe Genuth.
Okay, so that.
You can find him on YouTube and I realized maybe it wasn't a coincidence that it all opened from a student of Rabbi Ginsburgh.
Understood.
That I explored all these others, but I said what caught me from the very start was a student of him. So then I started going to the classes, and for 3 years I would sit there, and I couldn't understand anything, but it was like this ambience. His voice was in the background. And this is called in Chassidut or makif, a surrounding light. You don't understand it, it's above your head, but
it's a nice energy.
It's energy, and it filters in a non-rational cognitive way.
Right.
And then I would also take the books from the stand, and I would try to go over them. I couldn't understand those either. But every once in a while, you pick up on a word, and you pick up on a sentence that makes sense, and then it connects something that you hear from what he's saying. And then this is called inner light. It's the surrounding light, the inner light. And at some point, gradually, it started clicking. And then what happened was that I was writing at that point. I was writing essays about what I was going through and what I was trying to bridge the worlds, because I grew up until I was 26. I was totally secular. Then I discovered Judaism, so I wanted to connect the worlds, and I wanted to write essays that conveyed my this revelation that Judaism has things to tell us about modern culture, what we're going through, what we're dealing with. And then he suggested I would write one of his classes. So I did. It was a class about science and the history of science. And then
what does that mean, to write his class?
Like to type it and then to adapt it. It's not just to write it, because again, it's very dense. So you need to open it up. You need to dilute it and give examples and explain it.
And then publish it somewhere.
Yeah, it was just like an attempt. We didn't even think about publishing. And then I did, and I added a lot of things from my own knowledge and whatever. And then he took it and he filled it with notes, like on the side border of it, full of notes. And then we met with his personal secretary and myself and him for like 4 or 5 sessions. Each one was between 5 and 8 hours long. Oh. That he just went over the notes that he wrote and explained them to me. And it was like a private sort of class. And that was the most amazing experience of my life. That's what it was. I felt that I was being tied to like a rocket, and I was being taken to outer space, and I was going around the world several times, and I could see the world from up there, and then to maybe some other stars and adjacent solar systems, and it just connect. And there was something. So that blew me away. And then my goal from that point on was to try and get his things across to more people.
Right. So it shouldn't be a 3-year process where you had to trust. Yeah.
You could just pick up a book and you can really understand it. And because there is so many insights there that it's beyond. The easiest thing to say is that he's a genius, and he is a genius, and he's a genius mathematically and musically, and just the amount of knowledge that he has in his head and the connections he's able to make between Torah and science and psychology and whatever it is that you would give him. But that's not even the most important thing. The most important thing, genius is, maybe AI would be genius. Right. But it's a kind of profound perception of getting to the heart of the matter and touching the heart of the matter in a very even simple way. And then all the genius is around that. It helps you open it up and explore it more and more and more and more, whatever it is you're dealing with. But it starts with touching the heart of the matter. And that I felt was amazing. And the other thing was that he is extremely humble and selfless. And he doesn't want, he's not interested in being, he doesn't really care about himself. And it's very, but in the best way possible, that he's just, as weird as it would sound to people who maybe hear his classes, he wants to, it's like coming out of love. He wants to share this wisdom with the world, and he wants people to see the infinite wisdom that there is in the Torah, and his brain is sort of churning out these new ways of looking at it. That's what it does. So,
but he would consider himself a Kabbalistic teacher of Kabbalah.
No, he would consider himself a Hassidic teacher.
Hassidic teacher.
Yeah, he's on the outside. People think he's a Kabbalist because there's a lot of Kabbalah to what he does, because he knows all this technical infrastructure. But it's Chassidut. Chassidut means it all boils down to very practical inner work. That's what it's really all about. Yeah.
Understood. Okay, and then this particular book.
And so this book, we started working on a big book on Torah and science. It took me many years to finish it because of the way I work and the way it turned out. But somewhere in between, he gave one class in Tel Aviv, actually, and he what he does was that he takes the Kabbalistic model of the Sefirot, what they're called: crown, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, And he takes this, and then he uses it as a model to put together different concepts or to explain a dynamic. And in this particular class, he explored the stages of love's growth, how love grows. From before marriage, from just having this inner desire to be completed by someone else, somewhere at the depth of your soul that's awakening. Also, what happens when it doesn't awaken. He explains that there's a whole Torah concept of vows, right? It's a whole big topic in Torah and Judaism, taking vows and nullifying vows.
Right.
And he explains vows in a psychological way. Vows is when you take a subconscious vow that maybe you don't want to marry. And then you think you want to marry. You think you want to find your spouse, but you have this inner block, basically.
Yeah,
so how do you sort of untie that knot? So
I'll just interject on that just because to expand on it for the audience. So when I began, I was in recovery from addiction for many years.
Yeah.
And then at one point in time, it was very clear that there were some foundational things that led to it.
Yeah.
Obviously that the addiction emerged from, and one of it was a commitment I made as a teenager to never rely on anyone for anything ever again in my whole life.
That's a vow. That's a modern
right.
vow. It's not a verbal vow. It's not a halachic Jewish law vow, but it's a psychological vow.
Yeah. From a sequence of events, I said people can't be trusted.
Yeah.
So I don't want to rely on people anymore. I'm not going to.
Yeah.
I'm going to rely on things.
And things, yeah, objects.
So, correct.
Yeah.
And then fast forward years later, I'm trying to get a relationship, but it's not working.
Yeah.
And that came up as something that
and then you need someone
central.
else to help you untie it. This is explained that you can't.
I need more than one.
But it can't be you. You can't get yourself out of prison. That's the famous.
A drowning
idiom.
person can't save themselves.
Yeah,
same idea. Yeah. Got it.
So
that was my story as well. I was in a 12-step group for a long time, and sponsors 12 steps. Yeah. So that idea.
Wow, but now it's behind you. It's like
now I'm here.
Yeah, you're married and you're Baruch Hashem. Yeah. So that's like the first stage. Then it goes on to the yearning and then attraction, and then how do you know if it's the right attraction? And then there's a whole bunch of stages after marriage. It's not just leading up to marriage, it's what you go through. It was this whole system of sefirot. And what was beautiful about this class for me was that it serves two purposes. One is to use the sefirot to explain relationships. And the other, I saw it as an opportunity to use relationships, which is what everyone is interested in, to explain the sefirot.
Oh, interesting.
So I said this is a perfect introduction to the sefirot system, to this whole Kabbalistic model. So then I wrote it. It was this little booklet at first, and then it grew and grew into a book. The original Hebrew version actually had a lot of very lengthy endnotes, which we didn't put in the Hebrew one because it was too much. So if you know Hebrew, you can go there. But the main bulk of the book, which is going over the stages, that became this book. And Baruch Hashem, it became like the most best-selling Rabbi Ginsburgh book because I really put an effort to making it really, really accessible.
Oh, so this is just a translation into English?
This translation into English of the Hebrew book.
This just came out?
Yeah, I wrote in Hebrew.
Okay, but the Hebrew book has been out for
some years, yeah.
Got it.
And this just came out. And I know for certain that there are quite a few people that it helped them get married. It helped them focus on wanting to get married, then it helped them get married. And then it helped many couples. I can tell you that his own, more complicated books that I drew from to use for here saved my marriage and built my marriage. That we would learn together, and then we could learn something. And every time, relationship, there's things you want to convey to the other person, but you don't want to tell them straightforwardly because then they would maybe feel that you're trying to educate them or you're trying to. It's just criticism. Nobody likes criticism, and of course it goes the other way around. And then we would learn it, and everything we wanted to say to one another was in both directions. And then you could just be quiet. You read it, and you're both. It's not me against you or me talking to you. It's us learning from something else. We have this book. It's generally the power of learning Torah. I think as a couple, doing a chavuta. Learning as a couple together. You have this text. It's not you. It's above both of you. You're both learners, and it teaches you. And so we had that. So one of my dreams was that this would be something that couples could learn together. If they open up to it.
Neat. So I don't know the content of it, but is it possible to deliver the 4 stages in a Cliff Notes
It's not 4, it's 11 stages.
I thought you said 4 earlier.
No. The Sefirot, there are 10 Sefirot if you open it up.
Oh, so each one is...
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why I thought 4.
It's too much. So I can give you an example. So there's one beautiful example there. It's a whole chapter, but it talks about watery love and fiery love. And watery love is the love of siblings. It's like being just very good friends. And you don't want to change the other person. You don't have the sexual attraction element. And it's just a whole level of just being very good friends. Water is something that accepts you for who you are. You know, it wraps itself around you.
Right.
You're of your shape. You don't want to. It's calm. It's cool. It's a lot of talk. It's flowing. You're mirroring one another like water mirroring. All this, and this is in the Song of Songs. There's a verse that the lover is singing to his beloved. He says, "Achoti ra'ayati yonati tamati." It says, "My sister, my beloved." So it starts with my sister. It's like the first level, first layer, is we're like brothers and sisters. On that level, you can't even conceive of divorce because we're like one family. We're one thing. And then there's fiery love. Fiery love is the fire of my beloved. And that's something that is changing us. It could burn us if we're not careful. It could cook us if we know how to use it. It changes, transform us, elevate us. This is what fire does. It elevates if it's used in the proper way. And it's all about getting more and more closer and closer. And it's all about changing and transforming. And then the whole explanation is that there needs to be a constant back and forth movement between the two. And what it does is that the fire, because the fire is dangerous, it could be very external fire. It could be fire of anger, it could be fire of attraction, but not a good kind of attraction. Because even couples can objectify one or the other, especially the man has the tendency to sometimes objectify his own, not treat the woman as truly someone bearing an inner world with her own, and reconnecting every time to the person that's inside the body. And so the external fire is very dangerous, and it can burn the relationship. It could be a fire of jealousy, it could be a fire of possessing, it could be the fire of anger, of criticism, all kinds of fires. And what the water does, going back constantly, having this back and forth movement, is that if you have the watery love, it quenches, is that the right word? It extinguishes, or it brings down, it turns down the flames of the external fire. And then it's able to reveal, or sometimes a different kind of inner fire is able to come out of it. A fire that's coming out of water. That's actually the Kabbalistic concept, that fire is coming out of water. It says in the Book of Formation that there's an order to the elements. And then fire needs to come out of water. And so it means that the inner kind, the good, holy kind of fire, there's holy fire versus foreign fire. These are the Torah terms. So these are all based, what's beautiful, it's all based on Torah terminology. But then you put it together and it becomes something totally psychological, spiritual that you can practice. And so it's like a day and night cycle. It's a monthly cycle. You know, Jews have this monthly cycle of being together, not being together. So it has to do with going from water to fire. And the whole idea is that every time...
So the water would obviously be the period of time where
you don't... Yeah, we're just like brother and sister.
Right.
It's just talking, and it's just being good friends. And not only that, every time we want to get closer, it needs to start with a lot of conversation, just very calm, very relaxed conversation, no pressure. We're not going anywhere. We're not, going to some place that we want to get to, some ecstatic place. We're just very calm. And then what happens is that this transitions you from connecting on an external fiery way to connecting on a deep fire. The external fire starts with the outside, and then maybe it goes to the inside. It starts with having attraction. And the inner fire starts on the inside. Is that I feel so connected to the other person, to their inner world, to their subjective world, to their soul. And then a different kind of fire, which is more profound. It doesn't leave you hollow afterwards also. Can grow out of it. So the key is the water, which is not fiery at all. But that's
right.
So there's a whole chapter there about how the dynamics of the inner of the water and fire loves.
Very interesting. So what I'd like to go back to is actually before we go there, I do want to go back to the whole gender point, but before we turn on the microphones, where you were mentioning the name of the podcast and the name of the House of More.
Oh yeah.
And the In Search of More.
Uh-huh.
So later this evening you'll be doing a class, I believe, at the House of More.
Yeah.
Which has been neat. We've been able in the last few months to have guests come out. We do a podcast and they have the opportunity to speak at the home and give a class.
Yeah,
so
I'm very excited to do that. Yeah.
it's awesome. So you had some thoughts on the word more.
So before we started, I told you that because it's a very evocative word. Like you think about it. I'm going to do a podcast called "Search of More." I'm going to speak at the House of More, and then the more I thought about more, and then I remembered there's a phrase used in art a lot. It's a well-known phrase that less is more. In art, it's well known that less is more, and the other way it goes the other way also. That more is less. So in art, is that sometimes you overdo things, or you add too many details, or you crowd the picture with too many things, that it's more and more and more, but then it's less because it's less of the maybe essence or the message or the energy you want to get across. And the other side, the more positive, ironically, phrasing of this is less is more. That sometimes if you don't, the things you don't say, you don't do, you don't go, that becomes more. So I thought about that. And it made me remember or think about this Kabbalistic concept. In Kabbalah, you have worlds upon worlds. There are levels. And there's a big question, how do you go from one world to another world? And the answer is that the place, the point in each world that leads to the higher world is the whole of that world. There's a whole.
Okay.
There's a place where things don't work or they don't come together, and you need a whole on one level, or you need, the Kabbalistic concept is called tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is contraction.
Right.
God could create the world. Before, it was more of God. It was more and more of God. It was endless light. And he created a space. He created like an inner space within himself. And then there was room for the world to be in. And we need to mimic this dynamic in a way. So to go from let's say, the most physical level to a level that's higher, like to go more into the inner world, your emotional world, you have to contract. You have to. There are some things you don't go, you don't do. And so I thought about this. That it's beautiful that if it's just more. Like I'm not saying you can change. You need to change in search of less is more. But so more is great. But like. Even just what we said about the fire, that you can say more and more fire, let's add more fire, let's make it more ecstatic, more exciting, more. But then you realize that sometimes you need something that goes against the fire. It makes less of one fire, awakens a more profound kind of fire. So less of, ultimately, it's less of bodily existence opens up to the spiritual existence. And then within the spiritual existence, there's also more and more levels. So the idea that you need to, at some point, avoid doing something or stop at a certain point and say, "This, I'm not going there." And exactly this contraction point is what enables you to elevate to a different level of energy or level of thinking, a level of. So I thought about that. That if once you add the vertical element to it, like the ladder is all about, even on the simplest level, that if I want to build a rocket or I want to dig a well, I need to stop the horizontal wandering. I need to take one spot and
make a hole.
And make a hole, or build a ladder, or build a rocket, and it's the mother base, whatever it is. And it means I'm sacrificing something on the horizontal level in order to get to the vertical level. So I thought it's interesting to think about
about more
and the adding the element of less into the more, and the more I add the less element, or the element of less, then I can upgrade them more every time.
Interesting. So I have to think how to make that practical.
Yeah.
Because right now that's a very Kabbalistic concept.
Yeah.
So I think that's a practical lesson.
Yeah, that's right.
I did have this thought recently that we say in search of more.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand it has, or the house of more.
Yeah.
So it's okay, there's more, which means we're humble.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side of that is that when we get there, there's also going to be more. So we can go another 1,000 levels, another 2,000 levels, another 3,000 levels.
Yeah.
And there's still going to be more there.
Yeah.
So that means we're okay here too.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So it has both, I felt like, humility and sufficiency.
Yeah. There's a weekly portion. Every time you need to think how what we're talking now is connected to the
Shmini?
Right, Shmini.
Okay.
So Shmini is the only portion that the name of it is a number.
Okay.
It means the eighth. It's the eighth day of preparing for the tabernacle to be prepared. But there's something about eighth which is interesting because it's a finite number. It's just one number. It's a small number. But it's a number that symbolizes infinity. So we all know that there's a symbol. Yeah, this comes from outside of Judaism. But obviously it's a connection. But it's not just that, because 7 is the template of nature and creation of the world in 7 days.
Yes.
And then 8 would become what is beyond nature and above nature. And it's more than that. 8 is the first number that if you cube a number, it becomes different. So 1 cubed is 1, like 1 to the power of 3. It's still 1. You don't feel a change.
Right.
2 to the power of 3 is 8. It's like the first 3-dimensional number. It's like think of space.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting. So, and it's always in Hebrew, it also means the word fat. Shmini is fat. It's like a fat number. It's 3-dimensional. And so you feel that you're like jumping out of the page. You're jumping out of like the horizontal level. You're adding a 3rd dimension, a depth dimension. And then it goes infinite, but not just infinite, again, as in more and more experiences, but more and more connection to the infinite God or to. But it's a finite number. It's a number you can grab, you can get it, you can you can have it on your T-shirt, you can. So it means feeling the 8th element, or being in the 8th element is being here, but touching the infinite.
Oh, I got it. There's the dichotomy there as well.
Yeah, like you said, it's. I need a finite number that I can hold. It's less than 10. I can hold on to it, but it's.
So I'll share one more thought about more. So I guess Parshas Yisro it was, right? The number of weeks ago, someone shared with me. I don't know what it was. It was a screenshot, like a little picture of maybe 2 paragraphs, and said that Yisro's original name. I don't know why a lot of names were changed in the Bible for whatever reason. They're always changing their names. So his name was Yeser at some point.
Who?
Yisro.
You told yeah.
So his name was Yeser, which I believe means more.
It also means more.
More.
Yeah,
so he was searching for more and more and more and more.
He was searching to begin with.
What?
Yeah.
He went through all the religions.
And then, what happens between Yeser or Yetel in modern pronunciation, but it's the transition from Yeser to Yisro or Yeter to Yitro is the letter Vav, and the letter Vav symbolizes going down back into this world. It's like going down from above to below. So what happened was that he went for each and every religion. Then maybe he got to the most abstract religion, which is something like God is totally infinite and it's all of the universe and it's all of the world, it's all of being, it's all of this. But then he went for the Torah, and the Torah appears to diminish it because it goes down to we want you grounded, we want you doing particular mitzvot, we want you doing particular actions. We want to take a certain plant and build a certain sukkah and do a specific day, the 7th day. So in a way, it was less, because he got to maybe the most abstract religion, that it's all about this world is an illusion, and we want to go just merge with the infinite, right? That's the highest you can get outside of the Torah. But then the Torah tells you the Vav is like the ladder, but it's a downward pointing ladder, right? You draw the Vav. So it was going back to embodiment and to this world, and to sanctifying a particular language, and a particular book, and a particular building structure, and that was, in an ironic way, it was less, but it was more, and so that was exactly that. It was the only thing you can go beyond, like the highest heaven, is to go back to earth.
Got it. So in this little clip, whatever it was, he shared it as the Vav being the Yud, I guess the name of God.
Yeah.
Right, Torah being brought down. Right, same idea. Yeah. Right. So then he got the name Yisro.
Yeah.
So from there, I said that maybe like the message for me there was that, okay, there's in search of more, but at some point in time, it's supposed to hit the Torah a little bit, or a lot of it. So since that time, we've been doing more. Very shortly thereafter, we had an event at the House of More with Rav Dober Pinson, and said, hey, maybe we should have some more Torah around it.
Yeah.
And we created an organization, which is kind of the umbrella organization that holds the house and the podcast. We called it More to Ma'or. So the idea...
More of the Ma'or, more of the luminaire, the light of the Torah.
More to Ma'or. So the idea was that we're searching for more, but eventually to get to the light.
And I would want to add to that one thing, which is maybe the most important thing I feel I need to say in this context, is that for me, coming where I was coming from, being about tshuva, discovering this whole world of Torah, the biggest revelation for me was that I thought of Judaism as something very small. It's a small people. It's like 1/5%. It's just one religion out of many. It's one finite book. It was weird to me that religious Jews, every year they read the same book. It's like, don't you get bored? You read the same book. We have new books coming out all the time, and you're going back to the same book, same Joseph and his brothers. Come on, and then realizing that this is completely illusory, that there is a kind of infinite light that's encapsulated in a finite text. And this is called it's paradoxical. It's the carrying of opposites. There's something far more, in a way, potent about finding new meanings in something that I go back to again and again. Because then, if it's a new book, a new movie, a new TV series, a new whatever, then I'm constantly distracted by the novelty of everything. Whereas when I commit, it's like in a relationship. It's like a monogamous relationship.
Right.
People are afraid of monogamy because they want more and more different experiences. But once you realize that your partner is infinite, but on a vertical depth dimension, that is more and more levels to them. And so realizing that there's an infinite amount of wisdom within the Torah, and this inner infinite depth, it corresponds to the outer infinite wealth or breadth of what this world has to offer. And then making those connections, that's the most beautiful thing there is. If you think about it, something in the world, and then, what does the Torah have to say about this one topic? I love dragons. I love fantasy. And then what does the Torah have to say about dragons? It turns out it has a lot to say about dragons.
Right.
Yeah. And then you go into it, and then suddenly all the stories from the Lord of the Rings and from whatever it is, it suddenly you have a deeper understanding of what this dragon symbolizes and what
does the Torah
you
say
can play
about
with
dragons?
it. When the fifth day of creation, there were the two great taninim, the two great serpents or crocodiles. It's a very mysterious word to translate. And basically they're dragons. They're two dragons. And then their whole story is about how one of them is a straight dragon, one of them is a circle dragon. It's like the Ouroboros. And then God killed the circle serpent and he preserved the straight serpent, but then the circular serpent is supposed to come back in the world to come, and that will be the source of all inspiration. And then you go into that more and more. There are stories in the Zohar about the serpent or the dragon, the serpent. It's one thing, that it's about how you open up the energy of prayer, and you do it by. You have to win over the external dragon, then you have to tame the inner dragons, all kinds of shit. Anyway, but the point is that I just threw it as an example, that you take something from the world.
Of the infinite nature of it.
Yeah, and whatever it is, the world is tossing things in your direction. And Judaism appears to most people as being closed off from the world and being circling around this thing that is constantly repeated. But my experience and the way what I'm trying to convey in the books that I'm doing with Rabbi Ginsburgh and my own books is that this world is wonderful. There's so many things to explore. But if you want, the Torah gives you like a guide or the legend at the bottom of the map that helps you interpret whatever it is you find in the world and find the inner meaning of it and how it connects to you
on
an existential level. You can live it and you can...
So that's why you were saying the fact that we're having this conversation during Parsha Shmini has some connection. Okay.
Yeah, that was just, skimming the surface, but that's...
No, but even the fact that there would be a link.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll tell you, my brother-in-law, the Alush family, right, which we spoke about offline because he saw that you were coming and he said, I know who he is. And so he told me the story of Rabbi Din Steinsaltz, where someone came to him and he said, how come you pray the same thing every day? Isn't it boring? So he said, yes, reading the same words every day could be boring if you're the same person, but then you're the boring one, not the prayer.
Yeah, exactly. If you change on the inside, then different words would be highlighted each day and different meanings to those words. And it's the same with the Torah. Yeah. So we have to make sure we're not boring.
Boring.
It's not the house of bore, it's the house of more. more on the inside of you.
100%.
And then you see it there.
Okay, so let's talk about this. I mean, it's a lightning rod of a topic to talk about a tikkun for the gender hysteria that's out there. It's a radical concept to talk about because obviously the general approach is just shut it down.
Yeah.
Shut it down completely, or
to go
or
all
embrace
the way
it fully.
with it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So I just finished a book about this in Hebrew. So maybe next time I'm here, I'll have a translation of it. But meanwhile, it's only in Hebrew. So I'll just say,
also based on Rabbi Ginsburgh, also with Rabbi Ginsburgh. Or
yeah, to an extent, it was more things that I explored on my own. But when I finished it, I sat down with him and we went over the entire thing, and he added his own input.
Beautiful.
And again, he always does. He's just brought it to a whole other level to it. But it started with something that I wrote on myself because I'm very tuned to what's going on in the world. I came from a very, very liberal world. So many friends who are part of this world. And so basically, I would give it the gist. The gist is that the concept that we mentioned before of tikkun, rectification, part of what characterizes it is transition from simple concepts to complex concepts. And the definition of the transition from simple to complex is called inter-inclusion. Inter-inclusion is that you have two things, and then one includes an element of the other.
Okay.
So you start out with black and white, and then you have a little black inside the white, a little white inside the black, a bit like the yin-yang.
Okay.
But you can go farther with that. So like in Judaism, we have the Sfirat Omer, the counting of the Omer, that's based on a 7x7 inter-inclusion model. You have 7 days, 7 weeks, each one has 7 days, and you take 7 Kabbalistic attributes, and you start inter-including them.
Right.
So you have loving kindness, and then you have might and beauty, and then you have the might within loving kindness, and the beauty within loving kindness. And you do all this. And so this is the transition from having the 7 simple objects to a multifaceted, layered thing.
Right.
This is part of what tikkun is all about. And this is what progress and evolution is all about, spiritually. And so what I'm saying is really simple. It's the following. Is for many, many years, the whole concept of gender and sex was very, very binary. Men are men, women are women. It was very stereotypical thinking. There was basically one, or for each culture was one, or maybe a little bit more than one, models of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. There were certain roles and certain characteristics. And you would be educated. You have to follow that exact pattern. And what it didn't do is that it didn't give room to each individual being, let's call it the unique mosaic of different properties, because we're very, very different. And the binary is true on a biological level. On a physical level, there is a binary on the level of gametes and then on the level of the organism, even if there are, very rare cases of whatever intersex people, but that's not the story here. So on a gender, and that's so rare, so it's its own unique thing. But most people, or almost all people, it is a bit black and white or binary on the biological sexual level, but on the brain level, on the psychological level, it isn't. Now the idea was that the world is progressing and advancing, and like the Kabbalistic term would be, we're getting closer to the world, to the age of redemption, or the age of this perfection, whatever it's this ideal we're striving towards. And that means that the world wants inter-inclusion. It wants more inter-inclusion. It doesn't want us to remain with the stereotypical thinking of if you're physically a man, then psychologically you have to be exactly the same thing according to a very specific pattern of what it means. And this is, in essence, a very good thing. It means that we're advancing from a state of disparate concepts to a state of complexity and inter-inclusion, where the man can have feminine aspects and it's absolutely okay and it doesn't take away from his masculinity, and a woman can have a masculine aspects and it doesn't take away from her femininity. She's still very much a woman, but she has these aspects. And everyone is a unique mosaic. Now, where does the problem start? The problem starts is when you're rushing into it. I think it's generally, if you're thinking about right-wing, left-wing politics and thinking, conservative versus liberal, then what characterizes liberal thinking or left-wing thinking is that they're holding on to amazing concepts and amazing new ideas, but they're rushing into it. And the problem with the conservatives is that they're very, very moderate in terms of not jumping to anything new, but then they tend to be conservative,
Right.
over too much. But if you can combine this, and that's one of the things that I think about the most, is how do you combine the left and the right? How do you depolarize society? And even just now, just a whole other topic, but now in Israel, what happened with the October 7th attacks, this was coming after the most polarized period of time in recent history of the Jewish people.
But this sounds how? I mean,
So we become vulnerable. So to depolarize, so what do? Is you realize is that the very concept of getting towards a more complex understanding of our inner worlds, that's a good thing. The bad thing is that you don't solidify the biological level first. You don't realize that I came into this world and my very complicated and complex and multifaceted soul was placed in a very, very simple binary reality, a bodily reality. And so I want to be both this and that, both male and female. But all this thing has to be embodied in something that's either or. It's not everything is both this and that.
is there a concept of male souls or female souls or souls?
Yes, no, there is, but Kabbalah would actually tell you that sometimes it could be reversed. It's the exception to the rule, but there are stories in Kabbalah of a male soul in a female body and a female soul in a male body. But there's absolutely zero thinking that it should go by the soul, because the body, that's your anchor to objective reality. The soul is dynamic, the soul is complex, it's multifaceted, you constantly learn new things about it. You can't suddenly latch on to one phase of your life, as consistent as it may seem to you, and say, this is my true identity, and now I'm going to cosmetically change the body to fit this identity. So there are actual examples from the Bible of people, like there's sort of Tamar and Yehuda. Mm-hmm. There's a whole Kabbalistic explanation that she was male and he was female. But she was a woman. You know, people say today, I feel like a woman trapped in a man's body. Why not say that you're a man with a female soul? What's better about this phrasing? What's better about this phrasing is that you start out with something that's objective and it's accepted. It's not self-diagnosed. It's not based on a subjective feeling that could change. It's a fact that it can change. And you start out with that, but then you also acknowledge your inside reality. And so it also doesn't mean that the pronouns need to change based on your inside world. Because we're anchoring ourselves in reality. Because if you don't anchor that, it's like you unmoor your boat, and then it starts drifting into an ocean of subjectivity. And we see it. Then you get totally lost in that ocean. So you need to be anchored. Once you're anchored, and so you're tied to the
then explore.
Pier, then you can explore.
Explore your
But you're
landscape.
constantly, so like the metaphor that I always use is of watercolors. If you ever use watercolor, you know that the combinations of colors are very beautiful. You have a little blue and a bit of red, you put them one on top of the other, creates very interesting shades. But you can only do that after the first brush stroke, you let it dry. And then you put their brush stroke. If you're impatient, if you don't let the first brush stroke dry, you're not going to get those interesting shades. It's all going to be brown. It's going to be completely nothing. Like a swamp of androgyny. But if you say, I'm embodied, and then I let the paint dry, and then I add another layer, and now this has become very interesting, and that's how you discover your own unique mosaic and personality, including for some rare cases saying, I feel my mosaic is more of the opposite gender than my body. And Chassidut will tell you, that's beautiful, that's wonderful. There's so many stories about more feminine souls in Judaism. The Talmud is full of it, the Chassidut is full of it, Kabbalah is full of it. But no one dreamt that you would use that. And it is the wrong way to go. To say, well, let's change the body to fit the soul, because then you're also solidifying the soul. You're holding on to that. And so the idea is that we need like the joke is, or the funny way of imagining it, is let's do a new flag. And the new flag would have the rainbow colors on the upper half of it, but a black and white, stripes on the bottom half of it. And this is the ultimate non-binary flag, because because saying binary is bad and non-binary is good, that's another kind of binary. So if you want to really be non-binary, you would say, I'm both very colorful and very complex. I have all shades within me, but I'm also embodied in an either or reality of being right now, this lifetime, male or for another person, female.
And you see this as explaining also, like the sexual identity, gay, lesbian, etc.
I think so. I think that is a more diluted or a softer version of the transgender thing. So people today say it's totally different things and don't mix them, and there are talks that gay people are upset that the T has taken over the LGBT. Right. But if you think about it, I think that it's a softer version of the same thing. Why? Because the gay claim and the slogan "Love is love," it's basically saying, in a relationship, it's just between two persons. It doesn't really matter what your physical sex is. If it's two people, two individuals who love one another and they're committed and they care about one another, then this is love is love. It's as valid as a relationship as all other relationships. But fully internalizing the concept of embodiment is telling you something else. It's telling you that a major part of what relationship is all about is trying to cross what I call the gender river. The gender river is that you can take all of the people in the world. They've told so many different people, but you can take a river and you can put all the men on one side, all the women on the other side, all of humanity. You can split it, and it crosses all the other divisions of nations and wealth and talent and whatever. All people you can put them because we're embodied in these bodies, and then to cross that river is a very difficult and challenging task, because you have to come out of your comfort zone, out of the terrain that's familiar to you, and then you have to get to know a different terrain. It's a different body language, different rhythm, different body-soul connection, different associations, and that's a major, it's not a minor or a side aspect of relationships, I think. I think it's a major, major element of it.
The difference between male and female.
Crossing that river.
Right.
And what happens in a homosexual relationship or in a same-sex relationship is that instead of crossing the river, you're enforcing your connection to your familiar bank. So obviously it's another person, you get to know this person, and it's work, and there's kind of a relationship, and everyone knows, a gay couple knows that there's a lot going on there, and it's inner work that's going on there. I'm not saying there isn't. But a major part of the work is bypassed. You bypass the work, you remain in the familiar territory of your own gender, your own sex. And in a way, it's something almost telepathic, like you touch the other person the way you would want to be touched, and you're touched the way you would want to. And there's you don't have to think about it. It's so simple. And it's strengthening sometimes your connection to your own gender bank,
right, of
the river, side of the river. But then you're missing out on it's not just, it's not a coincidence that physical procreation comes out of male and female. It's the same for the spiritual, and we're talking embodied spirituality. It goes together. The process, the journey of coming out of of crossing this river and getting to know the other person, the other sex, and so that's like the most difficult challenge and the most fruitful challenge in all senses of the word.
So you were explaining why you see same sex as very similar as a diluted version of transgender.
Yeah.
I didn't totally understand how the similarity.
Because you're downplaying the body.
Understood.
You're saying that's not so important. It's a minor thing in relationships. What's important is two individuals.
Understood.
Loving each other, wanting to be with each other, to care for each other.
Right. Okay. And then
that's it. And you're
transgenders.
You're saying the body is just an outer garment, and that is the opposite of embodied thinking, which is more profound. It's realizing that your body informs a great deal about your inner world, and full existence is embodied existence, and that means that you can't downplay it, and that's why it's a major element of relationships, right, that you're missing out on, and you're letting yourself go. You're just not opening that up, and sometimes it may be you're afraid of that other bank. Sometimes it's you're trying to strengthen your own masculinity or femininity with someone from your own sex, but who loves you from the outside, and then you borrow a strength of a sense of confidence in your own. Right. All this is good and well, but you're losing something else. That's more major, in my opinion. And that's the way I explain it.
Right. So let's go back to where this started. Where this started is you're talking about Shabtai Tzvi and the Baal Shem Tov.
Yeah.
And how Shabtai Tzvi is taking essentially a holy desire, right? Or not his desire, a global desire, a world desire, a godly desire for Kabbalah to be introduced to the world in a relevant way.
Yeah.
He distorted it,
Yeah.
and now the Baal Shem Tov rectified it.
Yeah.
So here you're saying the same thing, that there's a godly desire for there to be more
For
what?
us to appreciate the full complexity and uniqueness of each soul. This is so the Kabbalistic term is that everything in the world has a divine spark. And in this sense, the whole gender bender movement in its entirety and the LGBT movement, there's a massively high and potent divine spark
And that
that's
divine
hiding
spark
there.
is both
And if we
masculine
just
and
rule it out, say that's wrong,
Understood.
that's perverse, whatever, we're losing the opportunity, or we're missing the opportunity. We're the frum people, the dati people, the religious people.
Right.
And the holy spark here, maybe people would say, well, now you're in danger of legitimizing. I'm not legitimizing. I'm saying,
But the opposite, yeah.
I'm saying
You're
that
calling them Shabtai
it wouldn't come to the world if it wouldn't harbor a very profound truth, and which is rooted in the Torah. And there's so many room for it. And so on the revealed level of the Torah, like the level of Jewish law, it's very simple. That things you can do, you can't do. And it's all simple. But if you go to the inner dimension of the Torah, right, which is what the Baal Shem Tov did, maybe what Shabtai Tzvi wanted also. He wanted everyone to be acquainted with the full gamut of the inner shades or colors of the soul. And that's a real thing. So to do it in a good way is to preserve the binary in the fullest sense of the word, of realizing that I'm embodied. I came into this world in this lifetime. I have the opportunity to be a man, also the obligation in a way to be a man, also the chance to play this role right now. But don't ignore.
Don't end your inner exploration there.
Yeah, and contain it and explore it and incorporate it into your full being. And you don't need to repress anything. You don't need to cheat yourself or lie to yourself. You don't have something. And even some people would say, well, I'm just not attracted to women at all. And I'm not attracted to men at all. So I'm not saying I have everything but the first thing I would say is you don't need to be attracted to women. That's a totally external way of thinking about it. That's coming out of the idea that you need to have a lot of partners. You need to find one person. It's a totally different thing, being attracted to women or not attracted to women, and growing an attraction to a certain individual for that attraction to be part of a very meaningful and significant connection. That what you want is you want it to be full. You can have a spiritual connection, an emotional connection, and if you want it to be totally full, you want it also to be embodied. That relation also to be embodied.
To be a physical attraction also.
And that happens. I know people that's what happened. If they told themselves, I want to be attracted to women, that would never work in a million years. But if they're focusing on a particular individual, and then they get to know that person, and an emotional attraction starts building, that filters down to the physical level. And that's something that people don't talk about.
I've definitely heard it in the reverse. I know a woman who fell in love with a woman, and she said she's not lesbian.
Yeah.
She's not homosexual. She just fell in love with this person.
Yeah, this is happening all over the place. And there are tons of people liberals tell these stories all the time about someone who's finding out, discovering the homosexual within them or the gay person within them, because they're opening up, and it could go in both directions. It's a two-way street, and then it becomes a question of, well, what should we strive for?
So, what do you think the gay or transgender movement thinks about your idea? You think they like it or hate it?
So what happens always is that if they hear a superficial...
I know each individual is unique, which is your primary point here.
Yeah.
Right, unique and endless.
So it really depends on how it's presented and how much time I'm given to present it. and I don't know what's going to come out of this particular podcast. We'll wait and see what the reactions will be. It's also pretty late into the podcast. We'll see what happens. But,
only the real diehard fans.
If you do it in a short way, in a superficial way, it could annoy people. But usually what I do is that the way I get it across and I present the full, all sides of it, then it's the usual reaction is a surprise. And it's interesting, and I think about it. And I can tell you that it did help some people who wanted to they came to a certain moment in life, a point in life, that they said, well, what I really, really want is to raise a family with the mother and the father raising their mutual kid together. I think that's the ideal, but how do I do it? And I'm not there. And then this kind of thinking helped them. Right? They did a lot. They're amazing people. They did amazing work. But this kind of thinking. So whenever I presented it to people, the reaction has usually been quite positive, and something like, we need to think about it. We need to. So we'll wait and see. The book isn't out yet in Hebrew, so we'll wait and see what it's.
It's not out in Hebrew either.
No, I just finished writing it just recently. Okay. Yeah, it's not out at all. Yeah.
So it'll be out soon. Okay, very interesting. But I'm sure you've shared this idea before.
Sorry?
I'm sure you've shared the idea.
Yeah,
spoken.
I've spoken it, and again, the reaction is overall very positive. Yeah.
Okay, you touched on, segue a little bit, you touched on politics a little bit, the right and the left. And that's an observation that I've made. In the time of COVID, I was very into politics. Now I've not been focused on it at all. Yep. But there I was kind of obsessed because I saw how how much it affected our life.
Yep.
And one of the points I made was that, there's like the progressives, I just want to change everything, change for the sake of change often.
Yep.
And conservatives, we're making America great again. Like, let's go back to a time, like preserve.
Yep.
And it creates a beautiful tension. Change slowly. Change deliberately. Change appropriately, but change.
So that's centrist politics, which is not too much here, not too much there, and finding the balance.
No, actually, you want them both.
Oh.
No,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. It's in the tension.
Yeah. So this is I think is more advanced thinking. Is how do we combine the potency of both views, not in a way that's like lame in between.
No, then you neuter it.
Yeah. But in a way, so the way actually now that I'm sort of touring the States, I was able to give this in 2 times, and it was very powerful. The reaction, it was always a mixed audience of left and right. And there's an interesting Kabbalistic notion. It's called le'achlal ha'smola beyamina, that you need to contain the left within the right. It's actually even when praying, there's one of the halacha says that you need to put your right hand over your left hand, and you're praying. Like
it's funny because I'm more comfortable putting my left over my right.
So, but what does it mean? It means that, very simply, that the right, the conservative thinking, is better at building vessels, more stable vessels, on the individual level, on the family level, the community level, the preserving borders. And the vessel is like what you're situated, your house. You need borders. You need to protect your house. You protect your state. You need to protect your tradition. You're preserving something. It means that it has to do with those boundaries. So that's the vessel. And the left is stronger with the inside lights. The lights are the innovations and the creativity and the more original thinking and more being attuned maybe to the inner world. That's why there's far more art and creativity in the left. And the lights need to go into the vessels. And that means that, in a way, the order to go about things is to be first, you need to be more on the right, because the vessels need to come before the lights. Sometimes the way it happens is the other way around, is that the left brings something new into the world, and then the right reacts by building the right vessel around it. That's okay. But when you think about how...
But that means it was
how
there
to
already
make
also.
Sorry?
But that means it was there already. It was there already. If the right reacts to the left.
Yeah, so that means that so sometimes the left happens first, like the concept comes into the world. But when you think about how to do the combination or the integration of it, then usually the right is more realistic about this world. It's less naive. It's more cautious in a very good way. It wants time-tested things. It doesn't want to jump into, oh, we have a cell phone, let's give it to all our kids and see what happens. It doesn't go into the social experiments. The left is crazy with social experiments because it's jumping onto every new boat that's coming. And so the right is better if you want to be more moderate and advanced. There's a story of Jacob meeting Esau, where they were the twins and they fought and then they reconcile. And then Esau says, let's go with me. We're good friends. And Esau is the left, and Yaakov is the right. And he's saying, come with me. And Yaakov tells him, you go on, I'll reach you, but I have to proceed at a slower rate. Why? Because I have my animals, I have my kids, I have reality. Maybe for you, they run after you, or they don't run after you. Maybe you lose them behind you. But I have a different pace. I have my own pace, my own slow pace. Et nahalale iti. And so the right has its own slow pace, and it's a very good thing. But the whole point is that we do this just like what I said about the LGBT or the gender thing. Or you can go with feminism and art and psychology and everything that the left is celebrating. I want to celebrate that too. I grew up on the left. I don't want to let go of anything. But I realized at some point that all these conservative types and the religious types, there's something far more stable and sane and careful about the way they go about life as individuals and as a society. It's far more, and then sometimes there's a trend in the world and it's going crazy like fire, and they're, in Hebrew, the word chadash, new, it's the same letters exactly, just permuted, of the word chashud, which is suspicious, or the root of suspecting. You need to suspect the new a little bit. It's a healthy approach to life. Don't be so excited about the new. Be suspicious of the new. You have to test it. You have to see what happens with it. You have to do it carefully. Maybe you have to touch with a 10-foot pole before you grab it, and then with an 8-foot pole, and then. So that's what made me love the right, or open to the right, open to conservative thinking. But the balance is that once you have the vessel, you need lights. You need the lights. In Kabbalah, it's called, you want the lights of tohu, the lights of chaos, the lights of innovation, the lights of new ideas, which are, if they put in the right vessels, they're not chaotic at all. They're very good. In vessels of rectification. Vessels of rectification are strong and stable and healthy vessels.
Right.
So the right gives you the vessels and the left gives you the light, and then you need to include or contain the left within the right. That's like a kind of formula that has exceptions, but...
So I understand the danger of the left. The danger of the left is to want to operate without the right. And the danger of the right is what?
To get stuck without accepting these new ideas, which are the new ideas, are the future. The left is coming from the future. It's bringing all
so the danger of the right is wanting to stamp out the left completely.
And then you're stuck in the past, and then you're not going anywhere. And then all the most... everything that the prophets talk about, everything that the Kabbalah talks about that's coming in the future, it's all there. The sparks are all there in what the left is all about. But it's so unclarified. It's unrefined, yeah. Because it's coming out of this, they're excited and they rush into it and they love it. And also, they don't see the value of tradition, out of religion. They're still stuck in this kind of adolescent rebellion ever since the Enlightenment. It's like a 200-year-old rebellion. In a way, secularism is like a 2-year-old kid. In society, 100 years is like a year.
Okay.
So secularism is 200 years old. It's like terrible too. It's like they're an age or an adolescent, if you want to take another sort of scale. Then it's like an adolescent that's now still saying that everything my parents say is wrong. And there's this joke that when I was 15, my father was the most stupid person in the world. And now that I'm 20, I can't believe how much he grew, how much he matured in 5 years, how much he learned in only 5 years. And so right now, secularism is a bit like 15 or 2 or whatever it is.
Right.
It's still rebelling. And when you're rebelling, you're really a slave to the dynamic of the rebellion. You're not really free because you want to hit on the tradition.
Right.
You want to break the sacred cows.
It's progress for progress' sake.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I change.
Yes, and real progress is when you're able to mature enough to realize you're also a child, meaning you can learn from religion and from tradition, and enlightenment is feeling that I used to be a child and then I took things by faith. Now I'm an adult. I'm thinking for myself, and that's not an adult. That's an adolescent. An adult realizes that, they are more mature than when they were a kid, but even more mature than that is realizing that they're still a kid in relation to what they still don't know.
Right.
And this concept of more and more, of having there's infinite wisdom to be learned, that makes you more humble towards religion and tradition. And that's something that the left right now doesn't have so much. I think things are changing, but on the whole.
And you see...
And that's what happens to left-wingers opening up to conservative thinking, is realizing that religion isn't all stupid. That's one of the biggest things that they go through.
So you see the reason that religious people are often more on the right as because they're more traditional.
Yeah. The right is about
that
conserving and
shouldn't
being
be-
respectful of. Even a secular right-winger would be more respectful of religion than a left-winger secular person. Because he has a respect for tradition and institutions that have proven themselves over time. And all
But a
this.
true godly person shouldn't be.
Exactly.
What?
Yeah. You know, the main mantra of Judaism is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Echad is one.
Right.
And those three letters are Aleph, Chet, Daled. So the last two letters, Chet and Daled, it's the acronym of Chiloni and Dati. That's secular and religious. And Aleph is Emuni. It's like a godly person or someone who has faith. So the Aleph needs to be above both the Chiloni and the Dati. And to put them together, the Chiloni would be above the Dati if you write it from the top down. And the Chiloni is above the Dati, but the Emuni is above both of them. And so true Emunah is understanding that why do we have left-right debates in the world, all over the world, everywhere. Every society splits into left and right, and then within a left-wing party, there would be the people who are moderate left and more extreme left. There's a little bit of right and left. This is something totally godly. God has a left, right, and a right side, a left side and a right side.
Right.
And it filters into reality, and it comes across as this. As humanity arguing with itself, and each one of them has a divine truth to it. And you have to acknowledge that. It cannot be that God is just with one half of humanity, not with the other half. It can be that one half is like maybe is better at doing the first level, and then the other half is better at being the second level. But at the end, you need all levels.
Is one masculine and feminine? Right would be masculine and left would be feminine?
So that's more interesting. On the whole, yes. On the whole, I would say that the right is more masculine, the left is more feminine. And that's why feminism is a major issue or driving force behind left-wing thinking. And in fact, it's not just almost every left-wing contribution, like even the concept of like having a democratic school, of breaking the hierarchy. Hierarchy is more masculine,
right,
and equality is more feminine. So there is something. So, but on the other hand, there's also another aspect to it. Because sometimes the right is, like I said, it's more grounded and realistic. And this sense of sensing reality, like knowing your enemy, knowing who your enemy, that's sometimes in nature is a feminine sense. It's like the lioness guarding the cubs. And it's very, very clear about knowing who's on my side, who's not on my side. Sometimes this is the understanding this world in a very simple, direct way, that could be more feminine. And the theorizing of the left, that's taking all these amazing theories, but they're not so grounded, not so practical. They're good on paper. You can write this very lengthy, dissertations that are very wordy, and that's sometimes overly masculine. So the masculine-feminine aspect, I would say, is more multidimensional here. That you can see both sides as both, and it depends. You need to build
a lengthy,
model.
wordy theoretical dissertation is more
masculine. Yeah, I would say that. There's something about this because
don't we say women are typically more verbal?
So it's not the verbality of it. It's the disconnected.
Theoretical.
It's that it's so disconnected from real reality. It's like philosophizing that has nothing to do with how the world is, and having a common sense of how this world operates, and grounding things in reality. That is
right.
Usually, it's explained as more feminine.
Right. We need a house. The kids have to be on time.
It's like not dreaming, not being. Adam before Chava and Gan Eden, in paradise, he was alone. He was just alone. He lived in his own man cave. And it's the woman who's more grounded and more connected to what you said is beautiful, but what do I do with it? What can I
right?
Can I implement
The desire to have children, the desire to
exactly.
build a
Bring
family.
it out. She takes a sperm that without it would be spilt in vain, turns it into a human being.
Right. I saw recently from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he said that the reason why men have the commandment of pruruvut to have children and women don't is because women don't need the commandment.
Exactly.
They would do it anyway. They have the innate instinct to do
right.
it. No
Men could come up with the idea of maybe we shouldn't have kids. And today, the fact that it's like a trend a little bit in some circles, and I would say more on the left than on the right, then this comes from the more masculine aspect of it, that people have become so overly sophisticated, and the culture has become so like a whirlpool that's going into itself, and then you're disconnected from some basic, healthy, life-choosing intuition or drives.
Right.
And you're able to just ignore them and even say, I don't know what a male or female is, and I don't know who you are, whatever you want to be. And come on, man, there's reality also, be grounded. It's also, by the way, in the academic world, the fact that humanities and natural sciences have grown distant over the past decades.
Explain that a little bit.
People in the humanities, they have a lot of theories about gender and about the psyche and about culture and about cultural concepts and how they evolve. And sometimes these people go throughout all their academic careers without knowing basic biology. About what they talk about male and female, about gender, for days in and out, for decades. But their knowledge about, you just watch a BBC Nature movie for once in a while, it could really, really ground you as to what male and female are, not just in reading literary texts and comparing them. And so there's the disconnect from basic groundedness in reality. That's another thing that's characterizing a little bit the humanities within the academic world, but also generally the culture of the left, which is more into the humanities. Anyway, all these generalizations, of course, need to be moderated. But yeah,
it's a podcast, and we go to many topics. The last topic I want to cover before we wrap up is masculine and feminine dynamics as it results to kind of the topic of your book, which you say becoming one, right?
Yeah.
So the man being the man in the relationship, the woman, the woman, the receiver, the giver, like that.
Yeah.
How does all this shake out? Because obviously in society right now, that's going very diffuse.
Yep.
And what's the difference between?
So again, part of the diffusion is a good thing. It's us, each one becoming more complex and incorporating more elements of themselves. And that's a very good thing. Embracing
the
feminine,
grounded
embracing
part
the
of it?
masculine. Exactly. But just like with the watercolors, all this needs to come on the foundation of something that's very classic, almost stereotypical. Like, for example, the Jewish wedding, it's the man sanctifying the woman. And why is that? Because there's something about for the man to have the level of very, very basic masculinity, before you go into embracing your feminine side, you need to be the one doing the courting and the one doing the proposing. Why? Because you need to build a kind of initiative that doesn't rely on the other person. It's not let's slide into the relation, into our marriage. I need to decide that I'm gonna, the man needs to want the woman 100%, not because they both think it's the right thing. And being there on his own 2 feet is crucial to the building of his own masculinity. He needs to be there, and she needs to hear it.
Where
that he wants her and chooses her, and not any other woman. And he needs to be there alone, not relying on anyone else, not relying on her, not leaning on her.
Got it. Where is this at what point in the...
Sorry?
What are you referring to? You're saying... what's the practical thing that's happening?
Under the chuppah, it's that he's the one saying, and it's not just that. The Talmud says that the man needs to be the one to find the lost piece. That's something that he lost. So he's the one sort of going out and doing the courting. The whole idea of courting is that if the man goes in like a straight line, and to court is to go in a round line. He needs to fit himself into her sort of circle thinking. He needs to go around and find an opening. And to go around several times. This is what it means to court. It's like she's in a building and I need to court it and I need to try and come in. And this is the opposite of what I am. So I need first to have this straight line of I want to conquer her heart. It's a good thing. And now I want to find the way. I'm not going to burst in.
Right.
But all this is something that needs to go through. That's the construction of masculinity. First, deciding I want to marry a person and I want to marry this person. And it's not just a dialogue. It has to be like a kind of, I want you to want me, the woman says. Don't just ask me if you think we're a good fit. I want you to know that I'm a good fit. And this is something, so for her, it's good to be this, what the feminists didn't like, the specificity. The specificity is very crucial. It's crucial for being connected to a deep kind of femininity that has to do with being and not doing, and being grounded and being embodied and being where you are, and you need to be loved and courted. And for the man, for his masculinity, it's also important that he does so. And once you have that, you see that, by the way, with Abraham and Sarah in the story, that before they changed their names, there's something a bit effeminate about Abraham and a bit masculine, not in a good way, about Sarah. And that's a whole other book that I have about the women of the Bible. But then when they change their names, part of the name changing is that he becomes more masculine and she becomes more feminine. And you see that for him, you need to add a letter. He becomes from Avram to Avraham. It's adding a letter. And for her, you would think it's just changing a letter, but it's like going on the inside a little bit, because it's from you to hey. You have to reduce. You have to diminish. She's letting go of something. It's like creating a space.
Sarai to Sarah.
From Sarai into Sarah, she needs to like create a space. She needs to let something go. And he needs to add something. So for her, it's discovering the feminine within her. And for him, it's creating a masculine that isn't there. He could soul search forever. He would never find Avraham within Avram, because there's a letter missing. It's like a muscle that needs to be built. And for her, Sarah is contained within Sarai. You just need to shed off all the things that aren't feminine. And then you get to the feminine. Once he's connected to the masculine, she's connected to the feminine, they're able to give birth. And they're able to connect in a better way. And then there's a role reversal. She becomes the prophetess who tells him what to do, and he obeys her. So she becomes the giver, the provider. He becomes the receiver.
In the relationship.
Yeah. Why? How could they do it? It's the reversal of roles. She becomes like the traditionally masculine. She's telling him, you need to let Hagar and Ishmael go. And I have a prophecy you don't have. I'm seeing higher than you. She's higher than him. She's the mashpia. And he says, God tells him you need to listen to her. And he listens, and he gets up in the morning. Why? Because now his masculinity is not threatened. He doesn't feel that she wants to diminish his masculinity, because the masculine is in place, the feminine is in place, and then there can be a role reversal. Then you can have the inter-inclusion. It's like the watercolors drying. So once she's connected to her very simple, very traditional, very classic kind of femininity, and he's connected to his very traditional, classic, stereotypical kind of masculinity, then you can add the other elements. And that can really change couples' lives. Because what happens sometimes is that the woman is frustrated that the man isn't masculine enough.
Yes.
She's really frustrated. And it forces her to become more masculine. And what happens to him? He becomes even more effeminate, because he feels there's no room for his masculinity to grow. And he feels that she is basically castrating him.
Right.
But if you would ask her, she says, of course I'm forced to be masculine, because he's so effeminate, so what can I do? And if you would ask him, he would say, yeah, of course I'm not masculine. Look at the way she's behaving. And they each blame, and then there's a vicious circle. And you reverse that by focusing on yourself. I'm not rectifying the other person, I'm rectifying myself. And even if my wife is insulting me, I'm going to work on my masculinity. I'm not going to ignore her, and I'm going to really work on it and that would cause her. And then she would be able to relax and calm down, let go a little bit, and let go of maybe a letter she's holding to, or an energy she's holding to, which is yours. So each one needs to work on themselves, and they need to go back to having the foundational levels, which is classic binary masculinity, femininity, and after that's in place, then they can say, well, the man can say, I'm embracing my feminine side, the other way around, and then there could be a lot of reciprocity about who's learning from who's giving to who.
So a couple listening to this, right, where the woman is completely dominating the man, can just say, or the man is completely being dominated by the woman. I don't want to say it in a way that it makes it sound like the woman's fault. The man is allowing himself to be dominated completely by the woman. In that couple, they could be listening to this and say, okay, I said Harayat Mekudeshes Li under the chuppah. So I did it, and now everything is fine because we each in place our unique roles. So how do we? But clearly,
clearly no, it's not just that.
Right. So how do we know? How do we know whether?
So masculinity, what it's all about, is being. It's like a pole with two, like a line with two poles to it, or two sides. One level of masculinity is I want to be above the emotional storms of reality. Like Noach's ark that's floating above the storm, the deluge. Yes. I want to be connected to Torah, to Emunah, faith, and I want to keep my head over the water. But I also want to be very, very much tuned to everything that's going down here in the world. And I want to share with, inside me, I have to be connected to the vulnerable side of me and to the part that's imperfect. And then I can empathize with my kids, with my wife, with everyone else, but I don't lose myself in this. And that's what a woman is dreaming about. She's dreaming about someone who is, who she can have this, soul talk or emotional heart-to-heart talk, but it would also come from a place that's above it, that's stable, that's holding its head above the water. And if you're able to tune into that, and if you're not there, that means that something is, you need to work on something about this masculine. So you need to be, it has to do with stability and being rooted and not being swayed by any old mood and reaction. And it's okay to let the woman be swayed because it's part of her thing. She is experiencing the rhythm of nature to a degree that you're not supposed to.
The men are not supposed to.
The men are not supposed to. And so if she is angry and sad and excited and or if she's bursting out at you, whatever, and if you're reacting immediately, then you made the worst mistake you can make, because that's not, the whole thing is she's testing you to see if you're not so fazed so easily. You want to listen, you want to show an interest, you want to be there and listen and see what she's going about, but you don't start by being a reaction. If it's constant action-reaction, that's the opposite of what masculinity is all about. Masculinity is that I can bring something new to the table, a new energy, a higher vision, a higher vantage point. And I'm bringing it and not remaining there. That's being cold and aloof. That's also very bad. So if it's only the high pole, then I'm cold and aloof, and I'm not reacting, but it's also horrible.
Disengaged.
It's like turning a cold shoulder.
Right.
I hear you, and then you're being very, what's the word? You're condescending. And if you're only at the bottom pole, then you get carried into the feeling of anxiety or worry or anger that she has at you, and you start reacting, or you're going with it, you're going against it. But if you're able to combine those things, that's what masculinity is all about. This is the straight line that represents masculinity. So you need to have both poles.
So once someone knows that that's there, then that's kind of the base of the painting.
Exactly.
And then from there...
And from there, that could start working. And for the woman, it's basically saying, I may be a feminist and making a lot of money and being very sophisticated, but there's also a level to me that's very classically feminine, in which I want to lean on my husband. I need him. Feminism is all about men. Women don't need men. Or a woman needs a man like a bicycle, like a fish needs a bicycle, whatever that is. And we need each other. It's completely false. We need each other. And the most, career or whatever, successful woman in the world, and I'm not saying this because I'm saying this, because my wife is saying this. She's a very successful woman. She's saying this to all the women around her. And sometimes they're very frustrated. They feel that they're more sophisticated than their husbands, and they are. And it's not just their feeling. It's that many times they are. They constantly learn new things, and their husbands are a bit stuck. And because the men today are very confused about how do we live in a world in which women are so successful. That's a whole... But she tells them, it's wonderful that you're working, you have a career, and you're learning, and you're teaching, whatever you're doing, it's amazing. But there's a little point within you, there's a side to you, it's like the diminished moon that needs to get light. And if you focus on that, and he would feel what's the most important thing for men to feel, that they're needed. People are afraid of neediness. But if you think of it, you can flip it around. If men feel needed, then it opens up their masculinity. They feel that they have a purpose, and then they want to be the best versions of themselves and the best men and husbands and fathers they can be. If they feel unneeded, then they just totally lost. Totally lost. They don't know what to do. But if the woman finds an element, a little point in herself in which she's weak and vulnerable, and she needs a man, like in the olden days, someone to lean on. And there's a verse in Song of Songs which perfectly encapsulates this. It says, Mizot olam min hamidbar. Who is this woman rising from the desert? And she's rising. She's on the rise. It's the rise of the feminine today. Mm-hmm. But she's leaning on her husband. That's the continuation of the same verse. And I always say this. She can be rising, and even rising above him. and at the same time to be leaning on him. In Hebrew, it's mitrapeket al doda. It's like to lean and to cuddle even. It's to leaning and cuddling against him. And then he feels that his purpose, and then he really becomes a better man and a better husband and a better father. And then she can let go some more. And then the vicious circle becomes a very positive circle.
So I wanted to make sure I picked up on a correct detail in the story of Avram and Sarah, that his masculinity came out from her, through her. And before that time...
Yeah, so what happened was that they both changed their names. They both had to change their names. And it's a big question who changed his name first. It's not simple. But if basically, according to it says that the written Torah is more masculine and the oral Torah is more feminine. The written Torah, he changes his name first. In the oral Torah, she changes her name first. So that's also a message. Like for women, look at the oral Torah. That's feminine. It says the women should change first. But for the men, you need to look at the written Torah. So they each change. The more he works on his masculinity, the more she's able to connect to her femininity, and the other way around. Don't wait for the other person to start. You need to start, and then you can change the circle. You can turn the tide.
So, but did that happen before they began the relationship, or
during? During. It was a late stage.
Okay, so the stimulus for him to change.
It was
came
the stimulus
through the relationship.
was from Hashem. Hashem told him, you need to change your names. It's not going to work with these names, and then the names symbolize him in a not positive, effeminate state, integrating the feminine before building the masculine, and for her, the other way around. And so basically, Hashem is telling them, the reason you're arguing and you're not having kids, and again, it's a symbol of not being, the relationship not working, is you need to change your names, change your way of thinking, and then it starts working. And by the way, the image exactly after the name change, like the next scene in the Bible, is there's a tent, and he's on the outside, she's on the inside. Very, very classic. Like the woman on the inside, the man on the outside. She's a prophetess, she's bigger than Abraham, she's going to tell him what to do. But at that moment, for the time being, they have to go back to the classical binary. And then you can work on the more, sophisticated and interesting and out of the norm and role reversal and all this.
Fascinating. Okay, I want to say you turned a lot of concepts on its head, but you didn't. You expanded them beyond its point.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't like you didn't upside down them, you just expanded them.
I didn't follow what you just said.
No, I want to say, throughout the course of the conversation, I was going to say you turned a lot of topics on its head, but it's not the way you did it. You just expanded.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, there's truth to the classical truth, and there's truth to the new truths that are coming. And maybe the main motif of all this talk was how to integrate the new ideas, the new truths, with the timeless traditional truths. Yeah.
Right.
That sounds banal, but that's. I hope this.
No, maybe.
I hope the talk itself was less banal.
Maybe that'll be the title for the podcast. I want to thank you. Thank you for coming out here.
Thank you so much for having me. Beautiful to be here.
I might be a better husband at the end of this. We'll find
out.
I
hope, you should bless me that I would be the same.
Okay, so I shouldn't be too hard on myself that it's the most challenging thing in my life.
That it's what?
That it's the most challenging area of my life.
No, that's for everyone, man.
Oh, yeah? Okay, good.
We're all going through it.
It's kicking my tush. In any case, I'm here now. Thank you so much. And I wish you a lot of luck at the House of More tonight and in general with getting the book out. And I hope your trip to America is very successful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.